Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Adrian Alexander, Caribbean Regional Coordinator for Free the Slaves, Secretariat to the Caribbean Coalition Against Trafficking in Persons. And it's my honor to welcome you again to this webinar series. This is day 2, and our webinar series is entitled Addressing Trafficking in Persons in the Caribbean, Progress Towards 2030. As mentioned yesterday, this is a follow-up to last year's Caribbean Anti-Trafficking Conference, and it's the coalition's main activity to observe World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, which takes place annually on the 30th of July. Over the next 4 days, you'll hear from stakeholders from across the region as we discuss meaningful youth and survivor engagement, addressing the demand for commercial sex and forced labor, the value of anti-trafficking coalitions and networks, and the importance of self-care to prevent burnout. Please note that all webinar sessions are being recorded, and all recordings are available in the event lobby on Zoom until the end of the webinar series on 24th July. So if you miss a session or you want to rewatch a session, you can do so in the lobby. Today's webinar is entitled Meaningfully Engaging Youth, Learning from Those Most Targeted by Traffickers. Moderating this panel is Ms. Diana Shaw, who founded the Child Development Foundation, or CDF, in Belize in 2008. CDF operates a dedicated human trafficking shelter and provides counseling for female survivors of domestic violence, sexual abuse, and human trafficking. Diana leverages her legal expertise to advocate for stronger anti-trafficking policies and laws and to develop sexual offense protocols for courts in the Caribbean. On the panel are Dr. Cherisse Francis, Mr. Richard Pinas, and Ms. Judy Sango. Cherisse is an educator, researcher, lawyer, human rights advocate, and consultant from Barbados. From 2019 to 2020, Cherisse served as Judicial Research Assistant to the designated Trafficking in Persons judge in the Belizean High Court. This led her to pursue her PhD studies examining anti-trafficking in the Anglophone Caribbean at the University of Warwick in the UK. She completed her studies in 2024 quite successfully. She's a founding member of the coalition and serves on our leadership committee and is actually my co-host on Freedom Matters, which airs monthly on WeFM in Grenada. Richard is a dynamic speaker and the male CARICOM Youth Ambassador for Suriname. He's addressed to Parliament on 2 separate occasions to influence youth-centric policy. He's a dedicated champion of climate action, serving as a member of the Caribbean Climate Justice Leaders Academy. Richard is now using his platform to also speak out against child labor and forced labor in the region. Judy is a disability rights advocate, motivational speaker, author, and law student from Dominica, who has transformed personal challenges into a commitment to advancing inclusion and equal opportunities for persons with disabilities. She has many leadership roles at national, regional, and global levels, including as the founder of Youth with Disabilities Connection. As you can imagine, with the type of panelists that we have, it's impossible to really do justice to their career paths in a short space of time in the webinar. So if you did not receive the webinar series brochure, you can visit the coalition's website at ccatip.org. That's ccatip.org to download that brochure. It contains photos of all the presenters, and you can view anyone's bio by clicking on their photograph. At this time, I yield to the moderator, Miss Diana Shaw. Over to you, Diana.
Thank you so much, Adrian. It is a pleasure to be here this afternoon as we engage on this important webinar. I'm so happy for the series that's been going on. I know that the other sessions are also going to be wonderful, but we're looking to a truly engaging session this afternoon. This is a very important topic for trafficking in persons. When we think about, as was mentioned, the persons who are most at risk in the Caribbean context, the young people are very vulnerable. But we want to ensure that this conversation is not just about doing activities for young people, but also ensuring that young people are pivoted in the decision making, that they are participating in implementation in the activities that will impact them as it relates to trafficking in persons. This is part of our responsibility under the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the CRC best interest principle requires the active participation, informed participation of young people. I'm very excited at our panel this afternoon, which is comprised of our young experts who are going to be sharing. And so I'm going to not take up any more of the time. I'm going to ensure that we get as much time from them and their valuable inputs. I want to start with Ms. Judy Sango, and I want to ask you, Judy, as we are engaging on this topic, looking at how trafficking in persons impact young people, what's your perspective about the importance of young people participating in this work?
A pleasant good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to contribute to this all-important discussion. Today, I am speaking from the perspective of not just a young person, but a young person with a disability. And I am speaking on behalf of young people whose voices are too often absent from conversations about human trafficking, despite facing some of the highest levels of vulnerability. Human trafficking is one of the most serious violations of human rights affecting children and young people across the globe. It involves the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or exploitation of individuals through force and other means. Children and young people may be trafficked for many reasons, to include sexual exploitation, forced labor, and domestic servitude, to name a few. For young people with disabilities, these risks are often significantly greater. Many experience barriers to education, employment, transportation, and social inclusion. These inequalities make it more susceptible for us to be manipulated by traffickers who promise employment opportunities, financial support, scholarships, modeling opportunities, and assistance with migration. It is important for young people with disabilities to not just be mentioned in these discussions, but to lend their voice and their unique perspectives to these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy. Some very important things that you're raising about the added vulnerability of persons with disabilities. We're going to circle back to that. But I want to ask Cherisse to give us your perspective. You sit from a different space from Judy as to your perspective and how important it is for us to ensure that young people are engaged in the fight against human trafficking.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Adrian, and thanks, Diana, for the question. You're correct, Diana. I do sit from a different space than Judy. I'm not sure how much longer they're going to allow me to carry or attempt to be considered as a youth, but I certainly do spend a lot of time with young people as an educator, as an advocate, and I certainly do consider them to be one of my favorite populations. And I'm so pleased to see Richard and Judy and the others in their cohorts now doing much of the work that I am now considered Tanti for. But as it relates to this topic and the involvement of young people in combating trafficking, or as how trafficking impacts children, I think there are two things that I want to highlight before I really talk about young people's involvement. The first would be how or why children are vulnerable, and young people are vulnerable to trafficking, and the places where trafficking really can hide or where it can intersect with these young people and these children. And I think now that the global space has become globally the place where our children and young people spend the most time. I remember when I was growing up, I would be outside playing. That seems to no longer be as common. More and more young people are making friends, socializing, even making money online through gaming spaces, through games like Roadblocks, which I absolutely do not understand, but my godchildren assure me is very much fun. But this is where they meet their friends. This is where they build community. And community is how we all learn to socialize, how we all figure out who we are, what we are, where we're going to become. So these spaces now become spaces of exploitation, become spaces of harm if persons, traffickers, are able to engage with our young people inappropriately in those ways. Not only recruiting young people into spaces of trafficking, but with the use of AI, impersonating other young people, hacking into computers or our phones or other technology devices and being able to get images of our young people, posting them online. So there's a lot more harm there. Or using our children, our young people for gambling or for money making ruses or taking advantage of our young people in this way. So we have to be mindful of those risks and vulnerabilities. And unless we're having conversations with our young people and our children about what these spaces actually are, how these games work, in some instances, actually engaging with them and playing the games with them so we understand, we are blocking ourselves out from being able to protect young people. The second thing that I wanted to mention is Caribbean culture and the way that it has implications for our young people, our children, and how what should be safe spaces could potentially become hotspots for trafficking or risky places. And one of the things in the Caribbean that comes in there is familial trafficking. Anecdotally, those of us who work in the space, Diana, I know you would know, Adrian, we know that there's more and more familial trafficking based on the stories that we're hearing. And to some extent, the data that we're seeing from cases. And now, when it's summer, our children are sent to stay with aunties, uncles, family in the country or abroad as well. And in these spaces that are supposed to be safe, our children can become exploited. Cooking, cleaning, washing, the situation is not what it was promised. And a lot of times, children or young people won't tell their parents because of our culture. You're told, children should be seen and not heard. You're told, make sure you listen to your auntie or your uncle, do whatever they say. You're told, be quiet before I give you something to cry for. I'm sure none of those phrases are unfamiliar to any of us being from the Caribbean. But because of that, we open our young people to vulnerability to being trafficked. Outside the family, we see similar things. There's been some instances, I recall one situation from Jamaica where young people, I believe it was a football team, went from one part of Jamaica to the other with their football coach. And they were made to stand upon the street corners and collect what we would call sponsor walk sheets, essentially collect funding. That we don't think about as trafficking. But if you think about the elements of trafficking under the international definition and according to our domestic legislations, it fits. So we have to change the way that we think about trafficking. We have to not only attempt to formulate solutions for our young people, but we have to have discussions. We have to open those spaces for young people to help us to understand the realities that they're facing. Because these vulnerabilities mean that our young people, their emotional lives can be stunted, education can be stunted, their family lives can be disrupted, and they no longer feel safe in spaces that they're supposed to be able to inhabit. So that is my kind of circular way of exploring or explaining some of the impacts of trafficking on our young people or our children and why or how we should involve them in the solutions as well.
I love it. I love the wide perspectives we're getting. Judy was sharing about the vulnerabilities that we need to be mindful of. People with special needs, persons who have disabilities have added vulnerability. Now you're talking about cultural norms and how cultural norms can make young people vulnerable and how we need to address that. I want to bring Richard in on this conversation because as a youth ambassador, and also somebody very active in climate justice, Richard, can you share a little bit from your perspective how you're seeing trafficking in persons impact young people and why it's important from climate justice perspectives, as well as your perspective as a youth ambassador for young people to be involved in interventions?
Yes, thank you. I would say good day, everyone. My name is Richard Pinas, the male CARICOM Youth Ambassador of Suriname. When we discuss the sustainable development and future of the Caribbean, we are inherently discussing our youth, They are the true foundation of our region. Yet today we must confront a dark reality threatening that very foundation. Human trafficking is no longer an abstract or distant threat. It has silently breached the safety of our homes through smartphone screens, through social media platforms, spaces where our young people seek connection, expression, and education. And they have unfortunately been weaponized by traffickers as digital hunting grounds. The trauma inflicted on a young mind caught in this trap is profound, fracturing their sense of safety and their entire potential. Today, we are here to shift from awareness to collaborative action. I want to invite each of you shortly to share how you see the impact manifesting in your respective spaces. To build bulletproof regional defenses, we must radically change our approach. We cannot view youth merely as vulnerable victims. We must empower them as active architects of the solution. So all of the other young people that are currently watching, I want to encourage you to also bring forward your input so we all can brainstorm together on how we can tackle this calamity that is taking place right now. And in closing, I want to say there's nothing wrong with the Caribbean that cannot be fixed by what is right with the Caribbean. And what is right with the Caribbean is its youth. So let's maximize these moments to set rigorous action-oriented tone for the rest of this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. Awesome. I love it. I love your positioning of the young people as part of the assets that we have in the Caribbean to fight trafficking. That they're not just vulnerable persons who are subjected to trafficking, but they are part of the assets, the arsenal that we have to fight trafficking in persons. So let's hear some more of those stories of youth involvement. Judy, can you share with us a little bit about your organization and some of the things that young people have been doing? You are the president and founder, and we want to hear a little bit about how we can use these connections. This is an example how we can positively incorporate young people and share their potential to bring change.
Thank you, Diana, for this. One example that I would like to share from my work with my organization, Youth with Disabilities Connections, which, by the way, is a youth-led organization committed to empowering and connecting young people with disabilities across the Caribbean. At Youth with Disabilities Connections, we believe that young people with disabilities should not just simply be consulted occasionally. They should be an active part and partner in shaping the programs, discussions, and policies that will ultimately affect their lives. Our work is built in the principle, nothing about us without us. One of our key inventions is creating safe spaces where young people with disabilities can openly discuss issues affecting them. Recently, we hosted an online discussion titled Building and Sustaining Meaningful Relationships as Young People with Disabilities. This session provided young people with the opportunity to share their experiences, learn from one another, and build supportive peer networks. Activities like these strengthen their confidence, reduce isolation, and encourage young people to speak openly about the challenges they face daily, including online safety, exploitation, and unhealthy relationships. Youth with Disabilities Connections develops leadership opportunities by encouraging young people with disabilities to facilitate the discussion themselves. We believe that everyone is an expert, especially those who live through the experiences daily. we don't just allow the young people to facilitate the discussions, but we also train them so that they not only become self-sufficient, but they themselves can go out there and be a part of the change and help somebody else. So it is a continuous cycle. We believe that the adults, though they have paved the way, they should not be the ones speaking on behalf of the young people. So we intentionally create opportunities for young people to speak, share their lived experiences, and influence decision making. This approach for the last few years is especially relevant in preventing human trafficking. And I remember when I came in contact with Mr. Alexander, this was one of the discussions I went back to Youth with Disabilities Connections. And I think the week after I returned to Dominica, because I met Mr. Alexander in Suriname, I believe, I remember when I went back, this was one of the first discussions that we had, because I think when he spoke, he left his conversation in the room sparked a fire. And it was then that I began to see that young people were being affected by this. So this is just a little about what we do. But we believe in the young people being experts themselves, and so this is youth-led.
Awesome, Judy. I'm hearing you telling us to leverage the lived experiences of young people, to be intentional about positioning young people as leaders, to provide the capacity that they need to training and other support, and to allow them to take the initiative. I love it. I love that example. Thank you so much, Judy. Cherisse, can we hear from you any examples you have had in projects that you have done, or where you have seen good examples of how we can encourage and not just encourage young people, but actually have them lead initiatives against trafficking?
Yeah, so thank you so much for that, Diana. I think that Richard made an excellent point. Up to now, I think across the Caribbean, we have largely seen young people as it relates to trafficking as vulnerable victims. That's been the positioning for a lot of what we have done. And that is good to an extent, in the sense that because young people are seen as vulnerable, there have been activities targeting young people as subjects. So public awareness has been a big part of it. In a lot of the Caribbean countries, there have been public awareness campaigns specifically for young people. So for instance, Belize has done art competitions and essay competitions. There was even a video competition at some point, which allowed young people of various ages to submit pieces as it relates to human trafficking. So it might be a prompt saying, what do you understand by human trafficking? Or something of the nature. And young people would enter these awareness campaigns as competitions, and they would win a prize. So that has been helpful, I think, in raising the profile regarding human trafficking. But one of the challenges that I have seen with that approach is that oftentimes the children and young people are entering those competitions just because there's a prize. And many times it was a cash prize, so that was helpful. But I'm not sure how much the young people learned from that or utilized it afterward. That being said, I have seen some positive examples from young people. So when I was working in Belize in 2019, I had the pleasure of supervising some interns at the then Supreme Court, or the High Court. They were undergraduate students doing criminal justice, and I was working with the judge, and I had them for a summer. So we had to figure out a project to do with them or something for them to do. So we decided that we would do a moot trial. And because trafficking is my baby, my favorite area, we decided that we would do a trafficking moot trial. And these young people were able to take up all the different roles in the court. So judge, bailiff, witness, accused person, victim, everything. They were all the roles. What we did was that we trained them on trafficking first. So they were trained on legislation. They were trained on some of the cultural aspects. They were trained on the legal aspects as well, what their roles would entail. We got some of the judges involved. We got the DPP of Belize involved. We got some educators involved, some lawyers involved, to bring some police officers involved, to bring these young people under their wings. And then they put on this moot trial. They were basically debating the issues of trafficking around a fact scenario that we had provided them. We invited all the judges, all their lecturers. So it became a learning opportunity where they learned about trafficking, but it also fit in to the degree that they were doing. The reason that I'm using that as a main example is what came out of it. After that, these young people, a lot of them went into careers related to trafficking, anti-trafficking, or criminal justice. One went on to work with the DPP. A few of them went into social work. But even then, they would always message me after anytime anything came up in the news on human trafficking in Belize. They would send it to me. It was one of these interns. There was a situation that ended up being smuggling and not trafficking that the media had incorrectly reported. And she messaged me to say, Cherisse, this is not trafficking. This is smuggling. So I say all of that to say, when you give young people the tools, they will run with it. And even if it is 1 or 2 or 5, if you can get that information to young people, they can create. So that's the example that I will give for now. And I'll allow Richard to have a chat, so we can always come back for a chat.
Thank you so much. That's pretty awesome. I think Richard was having some challenges. I'm not seeing him on screen. We'll try to get him back on so that he can share his example. But I love what you are sharing. This is so important for us to have this pivot that we can equip young people and allow them the freedom to run with activities, to allow them the freedom to do proper interventions. I'm thinking, I'm here in Belize as well, and our organization, CDF, that's one of the big things that we do is to meaningfully involve young people. We have the Rise Girls program, where we realize that when you provide the equipping and the safe space, that they really flourish and they do function. We have seen so many of them, as you have mentioned, go on. Once you have given them that spark to then pursue of their own career paths that reinforce the spark that was lit in them. Even as Judy was sharing how that spark was lit in her with Adrian. So I think that's very important. I know Adrian is going to try to get Richard on back, and we'll definitely get his input. But while we're doing that, though, we want to also consider that there may be some risk involved, especially with a topic like trafficking and putting young people so much in the public space at the forefront of this kind of fight. So what kind of safety, ethical considerations do we need to have in place if we're going to have young people operating in this space? And especially, Judy, if somebody has a disability, but they want to be involved in trafficking work, they want to do awareness, they want to support protection initiatives, what kind of safety considerations do we need to have to ensure that they don't become exploited while they're trying to help others?
This is a fantastic question. Thank you, Diana. I always tell young people you can be involved, but please be aware of the risk, because there are risks in everything we do. And I always tell them that nothing is worth risking your safety. So personally, what I've done in my work with my organization is I've taught them about how to remain safe on the web, not clicking links that are sent to them that they don't know the origin. I've said don't share your address or your current location. If you want to share something, then share it after you leave. Stuff like this. I have told them do not share your important information on the web. I've also taught them about sharing with media houses, because sometimes person asks persons ask questions, and especially when you are speaking about persons with disabilities, which is a vulnerable group. They ask questions, and because one may have different disabilities. Take, for example, mental challenges, or intellectual disabilities, rather. I'd prefer such a term. Sometimes it takes a bit to process the information, and somebody may not be aware of what exactly you are asking. I've told them, if you need to ask a question or ask somebody to clarify what it is they are asking you when you are reporting to the media, it is okay to do so. If you do not feel comfortable answering a question, you don't have to. If a question is too personal, you just say it is too personal and you move on. So it's these things that count towards us staying safe, but yet still not just tuning out our mind from what is going on right in front of us. And it's the little things that will keep us safe, but at the same time allow us to contribute meaningfully to that which goes on around us.
Yeah, awesome. And I see that Richard is back. So, Richard, we were looking at examples of engagement of young people meaningfully, not just as tokens of awareness campaigns, but how we can ensure that, we have meaningful participation, leadership, and interventions by young people. So, can you share a little bit about any example that you have? You are muted.
Yes, thank you, Diana. Let me start by saying that CARICOM has already set the necessary steps for that. When we talk about the future of the Caribbean region, we are inevitably talking about our youth. Yet too often we talk about them instead of with them. Today, I'm proud to share concrete operational model that is changing this dynamic for good. Within CARICOM, we have designed a revolutionary structure called Youth Leadership Network. This structure consists of youth leaders all across the region. And it's not only for a passive advisory group sitting on the sidelines. It's a strategic network that places young leaders from cross-border organizations directly into the official organs and commissions of CARICOM. Whether it is education, climate change, gender equality, or public health, young leaders are being assigned a seat at the decision-making table. They are not just observers, they have direct input into the policy decisions that shape their lives. But we have taken this a step further. Actually, 2 months ago, we have established within CARICOM a critical body called the Youth Advisory Committee on the Prevention of Youth Involvement in Crime and Violence. I'm one of the members of this committee. This committee tackles one of our region's most urgent challenges right at the roots or at its roots. How do we do this? Not from an ivory tower, but through a data-driven, action-oriented strategy. Please don't mind my English. I'm from Suriname here. We are launching regional interactive sessions. These are designed not only to educate young people on crime prevention, but to capture hard data. We are listening to their lived experiences, measuring their perceptions of safety, or mapping the realities on the ground. Second, we are developing practical toolkits for the prevention of crime and violence. These are not dusty policy documents. These are action-oriented digital resources built for youth by youth. They will provide schools, sport clubs, and local youth leaders with immediate de-escalation tools they need. The data from these webinars and the recommendation from these toolkits will not sit on a shelf. They will be brought directly to the highest level, the Regional Committee on Crime and Security, in which the program manager the one who coordinates the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors program from Michelle, is one of the members of this committee. I also spoken with her before I came into the meeting. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you that this is the essence of our work. We're building a direct pipeline from the raw realities of our youth to the formal policy makers of CARICOM. When we present to the ministers of security, we will not just bring anonymous statistics. We will bring the collective voices, verified data, and concrete solutions that come straight from the heart of our communities. This network and the advisory committee prove that young people are not the potential liabilities of tomorrow. They are the strategic partners of today. They possess the localized expertise required to counter and prevent crime effectively. In closing, I want to say this. The network is active. The advisory committee is 2 months into its mandate, and the webinars and toolkits are rolling out. I think next month we'll start with the webinars. We are not just handing young people a microphone, we are also giving them a vote and a voice where it matters most. Because it is only when the youth structurally co-create our policies on security, education, and climate that we will build a Caribbean region that is truly resilient, safe, and sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. That's an exciting initiative. I love the idea of having one data-driven policy that's coming directly from young people, but also the involvement of the young people in the data collection. And I definitely want to get some more impact and some more about that. But I want to give Cherisse also a little bit of space to talk about, while we are engaging young people and having them lead these initiatives, as I was discussing with Judy, and they're in the forefront of this fight, that puts them in a very vulnerable situation. So what safety and ethical considerations do we need to put in place as we are thinking about involving young people at this level?
Thank you so much for that, Diana. I think Judy did a sterling job of talking about some of the physical risk, but I would like to look at it a little bit differently, just because Adrian talked about the fact that we try to talk a lot about self-care in the coalition and also protecting your mental health and protecting yourself. And I think that is one of the biggest risks for anybody involved in anti-trafficking work, but especially for our young people, because young people are already vulnerable. I think that the young people and everybody has to recognize you don't have to do everything in anti-trafficking. So we don't have to put our young people in a position where they are on the front lines. When I say in the front lines, directly having to deal with other persons who have been trafficked. That might not be the place for all of our young people unless they are trained in some way. The second thing, but that does not mean that they cannot have valuable contributions. Richard pointed out how the policy pipeline, I think that's a critical space where young people should have a voice. Actually, one of the recommendations that I would suggest is that all the task force or the councils or whatever bodies it is, the title of in each of the Caribbean countries should have a youth representative. There's provisions made for NGOs to be represented, a number of different government organizations, but given the statistics that we've seen with young people being trafficked, there should also be a young person. And that is not something that is out of our remit, because every country has a National Youth Council or something equipped to it. Most of the countries are a part of the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors program, which Richard is one of the ambassadors, as you can hear. So there are young people who already hold positions that would allow them to speak into these spaces. And it's just to provide that seat at the table, as it were. And when that seat is provided, or if that seat is provided, it cannot be tokenistic. It has to be that young people are given voices that are then heard and responded to. Because that leads to one of the second challenges or risks that I think we have. burnout. A lot of our young youth leaders experience burnout, especially when dealing with heavy topics like trafficking. And I know this from being a former youth leader in Barbados myself.
Yeah.
There needs to be a better transition. So if it is that we're having young people engaged in anti-trafficking or in the human trafficking spaces, there have to be provisions for young people to be mentored. They have to be provided with the institutional knowledge that they can build upon. We cannot leave young people alone. Too often, we do not have succession planning. So every time a new youth officer comes into place, or every time something shifts, we start from scratch. That cannot continue to be the approach, especially in a topic of this nature. And then one of the other things that I would mention is having a trauma-informed approach. Our young people also need mental health provision. One of the things that I have found among our youth leaders in the Caribbean is that we do not provide them with counseling, we do not provide them with support, but we are expecting them to produce at a level that is so heightened. We have to be taking care of our young people, teaching them about self-care, teaching them about grounding techniques, teaching them about how to set their boundaries in a healthy way. Because too often we send them into meetings, international meetings, or even meetings within the country, and it's almost like we're feeding them to the wolves. And they're not quite sure how to respond, so they completely back out of the space of advocacy. That can no longer be the approach that we have. There has to be a give and take. We have to be wrapping around the care of our young people. Our youth leaders are powerful, they're dynamic, but we also have to take care of them. So I'll pause there and I will let Richard or any of the others take the floor.
Yeah, I think that's so important, Cherisse. And I want to just really reinforce that and ask. So, Judy, talk to some of the young people now who are so inspired by your leadership and how you have just stepped out and you're managing a lot. How do you take care of yourself? Talk to them about some of the things that they can do to ensure that they're not overwhelmed by helping.
So first and foremost for me, because I hold almost 15 positions within the disability community, for me, self-care is most important, especially spiritual care. I take the time to pour into myself, and I am a bit selfish about my personal time. So there are cutoff points, and I say to young people all the time, never feel bad about taking care of yourself. Because if you don't take care of yourself, nobody will take care of you. And so I take care of my spiritual health. I rest if I have to. There are times I sit in front of the computer like I'm doing here, and I get frustrated, and I say, you know what, it's time for a break. I take my break when I have to. I also don't neglect the time to socialize with other people, especially outside of the work that I do. Yes, I have a lot of friends from this circle, but I also take the time to build meaningful relationships outside of this, because being a part of the disability community, and doing as much as I do, I will tell you it takes a lot, and there are days when this work drains you. But I have taken the time to pour into myself. And it is also important to find somebody to speak to.
Yes.
And this is one of the things I do is I have this one person that I know if the day is tough at the end of the day, I can go to that person and just debrief for a moment and let everything just disappear for a moment. And so these are just some of the little things I do that make a big difference and allows me to return to this work and to be as effective as I need to be. Thank you.
Yeah. That's so important. That's so important. Sometimes, and you said you're carrying a lot, and especially we have this thing that if we see a young person who is very bright or who is doing very well, we want them to do more things. Like we want them to be involved in all of the groups. They have to be involved in everything we're doing.
Something else that I feel is important is saying no. As young people, I feel that, sometimes because the adults ask us to do something, we feel compelled to say yes. And one of the things about me is anybody who knows me knows that Judy is not afraid to tell you no, that she won't be able to do it. Because life gets busy and we all have a million things on our plate. And so sometimes if I need to say no, I say no because I can't do it. Yeah.
Richard is having some challenges, so we'll ask Adrian to reach out to him again. And while we're doing that, let's talk a little bit about that, Cherisse, in terms of our expectations and not putting unreasonable weight on young people. As I think, as you were hinting at it, that we have to give them the space to function where they fit the best and not say, well, oh, you're the prefect or you're the head girl, you should go and be in charge of this group and be in charge of that. How can we as adults step back from that and really create this safe space for young people to be engaged?
I think that a lot of it has to do with recognizing the strengths of a number of people. One of the things that we do, like you said, Diana, very often in the Caribbean is you see somebody with a lot of potential and all of a sudden they have to do everything. And that continues to ripple up. So I remember when I was in the Caribbean youth space much more, you would go to meetings and it would be the same people at every meeting. I'm sure Richard and Judy could tell me that it's probably still the same. So you know all the youth leaders because it's always the same people. But that in itself risks exclusion. And that in itself, in my view, now that I have stepped back from it, also it's almost like you're preaching to the choir. So you lose the diversity of perspectives, you get more burnout, but also there's a situation where it's an echo chamber. And I think that we have to be able to allow more people to participate. And that starts from the very basic level, even teachers. Candice asked in the group whether can we embed human trafficking awareness into the school curriculum in Trinidad and Tobago, starting with standard 4 and up to build resilience and reduce vulnerability. And I think the answer would be yes, but something like teachers not choosing the quote unquote brightest, but choosing other children to get the training and other children to be involved in the activities would be one way that we could start diversifying these perspectives. I always say as an educator that I will always go for the quote unquote problem children first. Like those are the children that I think, or the young people that I think are not chosen, but oftentimes have so much to add. So that's what I would say. We have the responsibility to start diversifying the pool of choice, as it were, and recognizing strengths in others other than the bright children.
Agreed. And we have to be so intentional about that. I find sometimes as adults, we think that it's going to be too much work. This young person has potential, but they're kind of off the rails. We don't know what they'll go out there and say. It's too risky. So then you want to choose a child that you think is safe and will be predictable. Whereas you say you may not be engaging the right people because that person may not be the one who is at risk or be able to reach the group of people who are at risk. So we have to look at who are the people who are actually vulnerable and who are the young persons who have connections to those groups and those spaces and equip them to go back and then reach those young persons. Because when I do sessions now in schools, I can see that some of the young people, they're thinking, I don't want to hear from this lady. So we have to be engaging youth facilitators and training young people now to go into the schools to do sessions with other young people. And their sessions are much more engaging. They are opening up to them. They are sharing with the youth, the facilitators, challenges that they're having on social media, how they were in a game and somebody was trying to send them some picture and try to get them to click links and things like that. So as adults, we have to be willing to recognize that sometimes in order for us to find out exactly what's going on with the young person, we have to get somebody at their level. We have to provide representation so that they see people that they know, understand what they're experiencing and what their lived experience is. and then equip those persons to do the work. We don't have to be in charge of it all the time.
But Judy, not Judy, Diane, I think more than that, we have to take the risk of young people not being politically correct.
Yes.
If there was
agreed.
ever a time for people to speak their minds and to challenge the status quo, it is when there are young people. And because of the political correctness, I think we often miss a lot of the nuance and a lot of the realities that are going on. Some of the best times I've had with young people and figuring out what's actually happening in the Caribbean is when I've been talking to young people who are in conflict with the law. And
Yes.
I've done that in Belize, I've done it in Trinidad, I've done it in Barbados, and those are the young people who have the pulse. But I had to be willing to be shocked by some of what they say and just ask questions. And I think that's where we will start to get more information on trafficking and vulnerabilities and how the risk of exploitation are changing. Because I think we're actually behind what's actually happening.
Agreed.
But
I agree, because when we are doing activities in the communities, we can tell that the pulse has shifted, and what we have considered to be the norms in how trafficking is being done or how people are being recruited is actually not what is happening on the ground. And I want to go back, because we were talking earlier about online safety, and one of the things, this is the big shift I'm seeing with young people, how much of their socialization is happening online, 5-6 hours a day. They are online, and the online space for them is actually their community. Their young people are talking to me that when they're online, not because they don't want to talk to people in person, but because they find safety, that they are safe persons that they can engage with online. And I think from an adult perspective, where we have come from a much different background, we don't readily understand that. And so sometimes we feel that the young people should not be online, but that's not a realistic expectation. There's no way a young person can not be online. No, but how do we ensure that they can be online and be safe, and even use those opportunities to also provide interventions against trafficking? So I'll ask Judy to speak a little bit about that in terms of how young people who are already online can be engaged in the fight online, and then I'll ask Cherisse as well.
Thank you for the question. So like you said, it is inevitable for young persons not to be online. It is a matter of remaining safe. And as you said this, it brought back to my mind those who are intellectually challenged. And some of them, we consider them socially awkward. So they don't have a lot of friends. And a lot of times they rely heavily on social media to be able to communicate with person and have conversations. And as you were speaking, this just came to mind that, this is where a lot of damage is being done. But it's a matter of remaining safe, knowing what to share, what not to share. In the event that somebody reaches out to you with something that seems too good to be true, then you reach out and you speak to somebody else. And I feel that a lot of the time young persons don't have that safe space, that safe person, that safe group that they can go to. And we need to give young people that safe space. A lot of the time we say social media or the internet is young people's world. I think it would help if some of the older folks would, rather than saying the internet is the young people's space, they would be our safe space. Because too many times there is this generational gap that we expect young people to function on their own, and the older folks do what they have to do. I don't think we can solve the issue of trafficking if we allow young people to function independently and not be their safe space. And so this is one of the major ways that I feel that we can combat this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy. intentional engagement, having adults getting in those spaces where young people are being. So this is a challenge because we do sessions with parents, and parents will tell me they don't like online games. They don't want to sit down with the child and play online games. They want the child to go and play the game and then come back later on when they want to go for a walk and go for a walk with them. So it's like, how do we get adults to understand that people are engaging differently now? Youth are communicating differently because of this online world that they now need to become more aware of and to become more able to communicate with them in that space. So Cherisse, I'll have you speak to that, and then I'll get some input from Richard on how we can get young people who are online to participate in anti-trafficking work using their online presence.
Yeah, so I think that, it has to be a informal curriculum kind of building in to help build that education gap. And I keep going back to teachers and the educational system because that's where I'm at. So Candice asked in the chat, how can we use social media, TikTok, and school clubs to engage youth in learning about trafficking risk from people their own age who are understanding what's happening online? And my simple response to Candice's question, as well as Diana, what you've asked me, is why can't we make it an assessment point or a testing class or an activity? We teach young people, they've got social studies, there is even religious education, there is something called, well, at my school, we used to call it guidance, but it was a module where the guidance counselor would come in and talk to you and about life. Females, males, life, career choices. But why is it that we cannot use, you can even do it in computer science. Why is it that while we're training young people with all of these skills, we can't integrate some of this knowledge and risk into that? Have an assessment where or have a class setting where they create a TikTok on the risk of human trafficking in 1 minute. That will teach communication skills. It forces them to learn about the risk of trafficking, but it also allows them to use this online presence. If you're doing art, why is it that you can't have your students draw what it is that human trafficking looks like to them as an assessment? I teach university level students. I teach international human rights. At university level law, I have my students draw what the United Nations looks like for them. Because if you engage students in that way, if you engage young people in that way, they learn and they will share it with others. If you integrate it into the informal curriculum, children are by definition going to go home and show their parents. There are what they learn in class, what they've done. If they're proud of what they've done, whether it's computer science or somewhere else, and it's in a digital format, they will probably share it online or in their WhatsApp group chats or wherever else for their friends. So that's one way I think we can leverage that and do it in a safe space because it's still in the controlled environment of the classroom. You still are able to teach about ethics. You're still able to teach about how to engage, what to ignore, what not to do, but you're combining fun with learning and you're working with young people on their level. So that's what I would say to that.
I love that. I love that that integrated approach is really the best model for learning. Like we have activities when we go in schools, we want to do think, pair, share activities. That this multi-level learning is very important for young people. So I really hope that teachers who are online are taking that. You don't need to wait for them to embed it in the curriculum. You don't need to wait for a curriculum. Use the curriculum you already have and think of how you can use trafficking in the material, how you can reinterpret the activities to include something about trafficking in a way that will engage young people and create that space in your classroom. Thank you so much for that, Cherisse. So Richard, we're talking about young people who are online, and we mentioned already that the online environment can create some risks. But we also know that there are some opportunities. This may be a space where young people can engage other young people and provide messaging around trafficking, help other young people to learn about online safety. So talk to us about how we can get young people who are online to also be a part of anti-trafficking initiatives.
Yes, we are. Yes, thank you. And I also want to apologize for the difficulties that I had during the meeting. My iPhone is overheating, or my iPad is overheating and throwing me out consistently. How to can you repeat the question again?
How can we engage young people who are in the online environment in the anti-trafficking fight?
Okay. There are different platforms, platforms like the one of Adrian that is doing an amazing job. So I think we should be promoting these platforms more. I think that the platform of Adrian should be working more with CARICOM, the different committees on how we can tackle these issues, and also with governmental organizations, NGOs, on how we can promote and bring more awareness to young people to get them more engaged. And one of the things that we can also do to tackle this trafficking online is to enforce stricter platform regulations, to deploy advanced AI, detect the AI to detect digital grooming patterns, and also by bringing the awareness to young people so they can always be alert. So when someone chat them, that they always can go back to screen to ask the how do you say it, go to the mother organization. I hope that these sites are online where you can go and ask for a screening, whether the person that is contacting you is a legitimate representative of the organization. I also think that we should also be talking to these companies to be more transparent, to be more open to the public, so we know where to go when such issues arise.
That's very important. And I like that shift that you're pointing out, that it can't just all be on the young people to keep themselves safe, that we have to put responsibility on policy makers. And this is about ensuring that their action plans, whatever laws that we're lobbying for, puts the correct responsibility on the policy makers to also act to ensure that online spaces are safe. I saw that this is a discussion that is now beginning to happen in the Caribbean about whether we need to regulate online usage and the online environment. But Cherisse, coming from that policy space, I want to hear a little bit from you on that, because I think it's very important. While we are saying, yes, we want to meaningfully engage young people, we don't want to make the mistake of saying that it is now the responsibility of young people to protect themselves from trafficking. How can we ensure that we keep that perspective that the policymakers have the ultimate responsibility?
I think that we just need to make sure that we show that combating trafficking is multi-sectoral and has to be done from different levels. So all of them have to work together. Young people have to be sitting in the rooms with policymakers and feeding into the conversations when policymakers are creating legislations, creating policies, saying, this is what we're experiencing, this is what is happening, here's what we would like to see. And then policymakers have the responsibility to craft that into a language that is legally feasible and appropriate for legislation, but reflects the reality of the populations. Some countries have in their anti-trafficking legislation, some countries like Belize have a separate piece of legislation at the moment that handles commercial sexual exploitation of children. Other countries, most of the other Caribbean countries, handle trafficking of children and anything related to that in a section within the law itself. I think that all of our laws need reform at the moment. And in that reform, in those discussions, there should be space for keeping children more protected, in the sense that there should, at the moment, some countries, Guyana, for instance, has within their legislation a clause that says any public official that is convicted of a trafficking offense not only gets the usual penalties and has to pay restitution, but they also lose their public office. There's no reason that there shouldn't be a clause that says any person who is convicted of a trafficking offense as it relates to children, and finding a way to add on some clause that speaks more to the protection of children in online spaces. At the moment, most of our legislations do not reflect the digital space because they're older than when the digital space is caught on. But I definitely think that there is space for integration there and protection there in that policy framework. It doesn't have to be even within the trafficking legislation. Most countries are also coming up with cyber protection acts. So all that needs to happen is that there needs to be additional clauses or additional sections that relate specifically to engagement with children and young people. And outside the policy space, I think it comes down to parents. So maybe we need to think about regulating some of the conduct as it relates to parents as well. I am not yet sure how we would do that, but I do think that ultimately some of the responsibility has to fall with parents and wider households as well.
Agreed. I think that it's so important because, as you have mentioned, while we have legislation, this era is so dynamic that we constantly have to be reforming and updating the legislation. I think the entire cyberspace is where all of our legislation is lagging. And even where we have legislation, like Belize has a relatively recent Cybercrimes Act, but we are already seeing that the implementation of it is probably being skewed by politicizing of some of the activities around cyber crimes instead of the real focus of using it to track online predators and those persons who are targeting vulnerable persons, which was the real intent. So I want to also, as you are saying, emphasize the responsibility of parents who are also duty bearers. And then, Judy, for parents who have children with disabilities, what should they do to ensure that they are equipping themselves to better protect their children who may be exposed in these digital spaces?
Fantastic question. Thank you very much. For me, the first thing that comes to mind is knowledge. It is often said where there is knowledge, there is power. And we find that based on statistics, most persons with disabilities come from socioeconomic backgrounds and backgrounds of illiteracy. And, and they can't do it for themselves. And so I often urge parents that while your child cannot do it for themselves, and yes, you want to teach them how to use the computer, how to use the cell phone, you want them to be able to communicate with you. There may be the next person out there who is not looking out for the safety of your child. And so I tell parents all the time, sitting down, having a conversation with your child, meeting them at the level that they are is crucial. So parents do not need to only educate themselves as to what is happening out there, but meet their children at their point of need and explain to them some of the dangers that are out there. And I agree, Cherisse, wholeheartedly that, some of the responsibility has to be on parents. Recently, I was speaking to a group of people, and there's this parent who said, I don't even know what is on my child's phone. And it just got me to thinking, how many of our young people have devices, they have access to the internet, but nobody is really protecting them. Not even the persons who live in the very household as they do have an idea as to what they are engaged in. And so I think protecting our children starts with information, informing ourselves and then meeting them at their point of need. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cherisse. So much, Judy. It's so important for parents to equip themselves, to learn about basic privacy settings on devices, to teach children how to keep those privacy settings, because some of the phones, when they update, they change your privacy settings. So you have to constantly be monitoring those privacy settings. teaching children how to monitor the communication that people are having with them online, and creating that safe space where the child feels safe to come to you to tell you if something has happened that makes them uncomfortable. I'll let you weigh in on that, Richard.
Yes, Diana. I also wanted to say that one of the most efficient way how to deal with this trafficking problem is to engage more with young people, as we are doing right now, to go to them and talk about the issue so that they can be more aware. And one of the things that we are also doing within CARICOM, we have the CARICOM Youth Development Government Structure, where we are it's a dual system where we connect the national youth policies with regional decision-making organs to ensure young people participate directly in Caribbean development. One of the fruits of this is the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors program, which I am um, uh, a member of. So I believe that by engaging more with young people, bringing them to the table, not just bring them to the table, but allow them to express themselves, to make their voices heard, we can come to the solutions that we need. Talking to young people, young people are always there to listen. You see, when Adrian invited me to come on his platform, I learned a lot because I didn't know all the things that were happening. I think I saw them, but I didn't have the deep understanding of the issues. So when you engage with young people, they learn a lot, and they in Dutch you would say become waakzaam. They become aware of the bad things that are happening around them, so that they can develop a system to protect themselves. So if they detect something that's not right, that they should talk about it with their parents, or go to the police station, not just young people, but also adults. So I believe that by engaging more with young people, also with the government, that we can come to the solutions that are needed.
The more continue to have more spaces for engagement, continue to collect the voices of young people. That data collection is so important. Ensuring, as I said before, we see that especially in the Caribbean, the trafficking modalities are changing all the time. It is such a dynamic space. We always have to be collecting data, be data driven, to ensure that we are getting what the initiatives that we are doing are led by evidence, that it's evidence based, that there's proper research. So you had shared earlier, Richard, some of the research that's going on through CARICOM. Cherisse, is there any ongoing research that you're doing around this topic that's going to help us to shed some light, or things that you're proposing for research?
So at the moment, I'm not doing much research involving young people that are leading research. At the moment, I am doing some research into familial trafficking in the Caribbean. So hopefully that will be helpful and engaging young people in that way. One of the things, though, that I am looking into, as I would have responded briefly to one of Candace's question in the chat, is how can we start embedding trafficking knowledge within the school curriculum. So I would have shared in the chat that some of the challenges that we would have come up to is resourcing as well as political will. And that includes things like engaging with the ministries of education, what the processes look like, pushback in terms of the competition with the formal curriculum that needs to be met for CXC or for whichever 11 plus exam it is in the country, with what children need to know or young people should know. So the kind of research that I'm doing revolves around those things, creating programming for children and young people. So that is where I am currently at the moment. We're still working through. I have some tentative programming, just not sure where it will be implemented or how. And I am working with some young people to get some voices into that programming to see if it is what young people actually need and how that can be shaped and formed to better meet the needs of young people.
That's so awesome. In Belize, we did a project 2 years ago trying to develop within the curriculum to support the life skills curriculum in the schools, components that would have included trafficking. The project did not go to its full fruition because we had interruptions with funding. But it's such an important thing for teachers because part of that, when we did the assessment to start that project, so many teachers were saying that they were assigned to teach life skills, but they really had no formal training in how to teach life skills or even how to engage young people. And they found it so intimidating trying to make the topics relevant to young people and trying to develop activities to match the topics that they were expected to carry out. So I think that that's such an important space. And I'm really excited to hear that that is happening because I think it's going to be helpful for our teachers. I know that teachers have the heart, they want to do it. All the teachers that we have ever spoken to, they're interested in doing it. They just don't have the tools, and we have to figure out how to get them those tools and also make it relevant to their space, right? They have like 45 minutes in a session to make this topic relevant and interactive. There's a lot that has to be done in doing that. But I'm grateful for that. But Judy, I also want to give you to weigh in on this because you are working with young people and you're also doing some work to educate the community about the challenges that people have with disabilities, but also how they are important in helping to address this. How can schools, NGOs, and other organizations who are working in this space be more intentional to ensure that our tools are relevant to the needs of persons with disabilities?
Great question. Thank you very much. And I also happen to be a tutor, so I think I am surrounded by young people almost every day, and I cannot escape them. One of the things is we have the organizations around us. We have the experts, we have the advocates like Mr. Alexander and many others. And I feel that our schools and our government, our education system need to tap into those expertise. Those persons who have been on the ground, they have years of experience. They have some of the greatest resources that we can use ultimately to combat this. And I think this would also serve well to train our teachers. And I feel it's just a matter of tapping into the expertise that is around us and just reaching out and saying, hey, this is what we want to implement, this is where we need your help, and I'm sure that we'll find that help. Thank you
so much. Richard, how can young people be more involved with the education space? This is definitely one of the challenges. How can we ensure that they get that teaching time, they get to go in? Do you do sessions in schools? Are you called to go to speak to young people in schools? How can we ensure that that is happening?
Yes, thank you, Diana. One of the things that we are currently doing in Suriname is that we are going to all the districts of Suriname to engage with young people, to educate them on the different topics that are happening right now in the world, such as climate change, gender equality, mental health, and all those issues. So at the end of this session, at the end of this district's Congress, the reason why we have this district's Congress is to also hear from them what the issues are with, what are the issues that the issues that they have, and how we can help to tackle these issues, to come up with a solution on how we can tackle it. So we are currently, I'm currently in Param. Yes, I saw that my there was some disruption here. Yes, we are currently going to the different districts, and I've seen that young people are coming forward to talk about the issues that they are facing, and we are coming up with the necessary solutions on how to tackle them. But engaging with them, I've seen they come up with innovative solutions, and yes, I believe that by engaging with them, we can seriously tackle this.
The more youth engagement, creating those intentional spaces to hear from youth and to allow them to also share the things that the opportunities that they are giving us for interventions and also some of the tools that they want to use. Awesome. Go
I
ahead.
also want to say that from CARICOM that there are right now different kind of trainings that that CARICOM is giving to young people from across the region. So I hope that I believe that it must be on the CARICOM page
Website.
of Facebook or Instagram. I hope that they can go after these sessions on the CARICOM page to see the different kind of trainings that CARICOM give to young leaders within the Caribbean.
Awesome. So we want young people to find these resources, right? If you have an interest in this topic, find an organization that's already working on this topic. Find an online website, CARICOM website, the Caribbean Coalition Against Trafficking in Persons YouTube page, or their information that is already out there available on their website. Get informed so that you understand the topic, and then also look for opportunities where you can serve in your community, in your school. Start where you are. You may not get invited right now to sit as a youth ambassador. Maybe in your future, it may not be there right now, but start where you are with the influence that you have, with the tools that you have, and become engaged, in this work. We need all hands on deck, and we definitely need our young people. So as we are about to come to this end of this part, I don't know if there are any specific questions that we will address. Let me just look quickly at the chat while I give Cherisse the opportunity to speak about how we can meaningfully engage young people at the ground level. Aside from those interventions that CARICOM is leading, are there opportunities, ways that we at the ground, the grassroots level, can ensure that we are equipping young people to participate?
Definitely. I think a lot of it has to do with conversation. Before I directly answer your question, I wanted to share a resource that I'm going to put into the chat. It is a comic that was produced by young people for young people. At the time, it was funded by the US Embassy, but it's called Crossroads, and there were 3 editions. The third one was focused on trafficking. And I think that this is actually a really good resource to introduce young people to the idea of trafficking in a format that more and more Caribbean young people seem to be gravitating towards. It has the style of a manga or anime almost. It's a comic book, a graphic novel. So I've put it in the chat, and I find it a really, really helpful resource. And I know that the young people that produce this are working on more follow-up work. I think that one of the best ways to get young people involved is just to start having a conversation. Our young people see more, know more, understand more than we think. But you can only know where to meet them if you know what they're thinking. So you have to be willing to have that conversation. I never assume that I'm right when I'm talking to any of my young people. I ask a lot of questions just to probe where their thinking is. And I think that is how at the grassroots level, we can start engaging young people, as well as using more creative mechanisms. Judy mentioned earlier, more adults, as Judy said, understanding technology and not calling it a young people's thing. I think that is another thing that can help to bridge that generational space. If you've got young people in their lives, ask them, so what's this thing about TikTok? What's going on Instagram? Have you seen anything about trafficking on Instagram? Can you tell me what you've seen or what you've heard? But be genuine in the way that you engage with young people. And I think that is where, and be willing to take their suggestions. Like I said, be willing to be shocked by what they're saying. If you're willing to accept that, if you're willing to go a little bit out of the box, sometimes young people will surprise you in all the best.
Thank you so much. Your final thoughts, Judy?
All right. My final thoughts is that I hope that today's discussion is not just one that will end here. It is one that will spark meaningful conversations in our homes, in our communities, in our social groups, because there is a lot to be done if we are to truly combat trafficking. And so I say thank you for the opportunity. It was certainly a pleasure for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard.
Yes, I would say that as youth, let us step up, take our place, and do what has to be done. So just bring the awareness to other young people so they can know how to tackle these issues. And I had started with this quote. I'll also end with this quote that I've learned from the Caribbean, that there's nothing wrong with the Caribbean that cannot be fixed by what is right with the Caribbean. And what is right with the Caribbean is its youth. We are the solution. Let us fight for our youth. And let me end by saying, let's wish it, let's dream it, and let's do it. Thank you.
Awesome. Final thoughts, Cherisse, as we wrap up?
No final thoughts from me. I'll leave the final words with the younger two among us.
Awesome. So just as we are coming to a close, two resources, the one that Cherisse shared in the chat, which is that Crossroads comic booklet. If you type in Crossroads comic on trafficking, you will get to it if you don't have the direct link, or if you're on the webinar, go to the chat and you can click on the link and download it. And then also, I think that there is UNICEF CARICOM study that Adrian has shared, a survey on youth and mental health in the Caribbean. If you type that up, mental health study on youth for youth in the Caribbean, it will take you to it by UNICEF, and you can get some information. All of these are important resources. So if you are working with young people to get informed about what's happening in their space, or if you're a young person that wants to get involved in this work to find out what is happening, these are resources that can help to get you started. Thank you so much for joining us. This was an engaging, wonderfully insightful, and great conversation. We want for you to continue to participate in the rest of the webinars. Thank you, my panelists. Awesome, awesome job from all of you. I am inspired. I am grateful to see the next generation stepping up and will be taking on the baton while I'm relaxing on the beach. It is an amazing, amazing testament to your awesome passion. I now turn back over to Mr. Adrian. Thank you so much for all the hard work you're doing and getting us involved in this session.
Thank you so much, Diana. This has been a tremendous blessing for me. I mean, you're inspiring panelists, you yourself running the Child Development Foundation. I think everyone can safely say that this was a tremendous session, and we learned so much. And I'm very proud of these young people. We worked together on a video for the CNN Freedom Project this year, together with Soleil Marie Collins from Trinidad. And it was so exciting to see that CNN selected an excerpt from that video for their My Freedom Day final video on the website. So the Caribbean selected from among tens of thousands of videos submitted from around the world. That was a pleasure. And we had a little conversation about that, how that feels to be seen and to be heard from the Caribbean on that global stage. So that's available on the Coalition's YouTube channel. Richard, Judy, Cherisse, and myself just having that little conversation. But I also love to hear about what CARICOM Youth Ambassadors is doing.
Yes.
So that program now has a youth advisory committee and other innovations. So kudos to them, all of the region's youth ambassadors. We were hoping to have Shaquawn Gill from Guyana here with us. Those of you who would have seen the flyer would have known that he was expected. However, because of that recent tragedy in Guyana, he was called away for work in relation to that, the incident with the ferry and the unfortunate loss of lives. But we also want to congratulate Miss Michelle Small-Bartley, who coordinates that program. Richard made mention of her, and she has joined us online. So, Michelle, thank you for the wonderful work that you and your colleagues are doing with and for our young people in the region. I just wanted to point out that Candice asked some questions in the chat. And I'd like to add to what Cherisse shared and her amazing suggestions for the education sector. Definitely some CARICOM nations have moved beyond simply requiring curricula in the anti-trafficking law to actually developing and integrating it into schools. Of course, everything is a work in progress, right? From that perspective. We at Free the Slaves in Trinidad and Tobago, we trained guidance officers in Port of Spain in late 2024. And last year, they announced us that they'll have used that content from the training to provide a curriculum that they ran in 5 schools in the Port of Spain Education District last year. So that's an example of how not necessarily going through the curriculum development unit of the Ministry of Education, but how you can work with people who have access to children, and they then can develop materials and resources that they know will gain their attention, they have access to them, and they can share that with them. For another jurisdiction, we created a 6-hour workshop. So from a 3-day to a 6-hour workshop for education and mental health professionals. So they work with youth identified with behavioral challenges, similar to what Cherisse was saying in terms of find those who are in conflict and so on, because they have so much amazing ideas. And then again, they're extremely vulnerable. Their behavior is just a mask often for their own vulnerabilities. So they will start teaching the children at the unit about human rights and children's rights, and also the risks of trafficking. And they're seeking to involve the parents and other teachers in a PTA style to benefit from that education drive. So thanks for all of the amazing sharing and caring. And thanks so much for talking about self-care, because as Sandra mentioned yesterday, she'll be traveling for the next couple of days. So you brought all of that forward, and those links that I shared in terms of the Young Caribbean Minds website from UNICEF and the report on youth and child mental health in the Caribbean done by CARICOM Youth Ambassadors. I know Michelle was involved in that, and UNICEF. Those links are available for people to access. So it is just a couple of minutes after our closing time, but this brings us to the end of day 2. And we invite everyone to join us for day 3 of this webinar series. It will be taking place tomorrow, God willing. And we'll be discussing a very thorny subject, sometimes considered a taboo topic, but we'll be addressing demand, tackling commercial sexual exploitation and forced labor in the Caribbean. So please join us for that discussion. And remember that all webinar sessions are being recorded. So if you've missed one, if you want to rewatch a session, you can simply log in, and they are found in the event lobby here on Zoom. So without further ado, I say goodbye and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. Okay. Bye, everyone. And thanks so much, Diana, Richard, Cherisse, and Judy. Amazing job, everyone. Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.